episode of Choppin with Chapman. So far in the series, we've talked a lot about developing the chops of our hands, but we haven't actually talked much about developing the chops of our minds. So what I thought I'd do today is take you through a series of rhythmic displacement exercises, which I wrote the notes to, but all credit for the actual exercises themselves goes to my South Indian music teacher, Puvalar Shriji, who's a phenomenal mridangam player, fantastic musician, teacher, just all around great person. So I thought I'd take you through some of these and talk about ways that we can apply them to this instrument to make to strengthen your sense of pulse and meter and your ability to move different rhythms around a consistent beat. So just to introduce these basic concepts, today's exercises are going to focus exclusively on 16th note based rhythmic displacement. However, in future videos, if we want to get into some more advanced stuff, we might also talk about how we can use these exercises around triplets, quintuplets, septuplets, any odd subdivision or any normal subdivision as well. Again, just to really strengthen that sense of pulse within each individual subdivision. So just to start, the time signature of the exercises we're going to learn today is going to be 8/4. And while this might feel a little bit weird for Western musicians, it's a really common time signature in South Indian music. And it just gives us kind of more room to play with as we get into each one of these patterns. And I'll show you kind of what I'm talking about here in a second. But essentially, if the 8/4 concept is difficult for you, just think about it as 2 bars of 4/4 and just learn the notes as presented here, and you should be totally fine. Today's exercises are all going to focus on this idea that if we're at 8/4, like we talked about earlier, and we play the first 7 beats of that cycle or measure as straight up 16th notes in groupings of 4, everything's going to line really happily on the downbeat. But if we take that last beat, the 8th beat, and play 5 16th notes, the start of the next cycle is going to be displaced over by a 16th note. Basically, everything's going to start on the E instead of the downbeats. We keep doing this over and over and over again, and eventually we line up on a downbeat again. So I'll kind of show you what I mean here. The first 7 beats, you're going to play basically ascending groups of 4 with a slight turnaround at the top. So here's what you're going to do. You take C, D, E, F, and then move it up a note, D, E, F, G, and then same thing moved up a note, E, F, G, A, F, G, A, B, G, A, B, C. When we get to the C up top, just for the sake of continuity with the rest of the scalar pattern, we're going to start descending. So C, B, A, G, and then B, A, G, F. Let's just run that first part so we kind of know where we're starting here. So the first 7 beats of this exercise would sound like this. C, D. I can't say it and play it at the same time. That's not good. So highly recommend just practicing that pattern up and down the scale so you get really comfortable with these first 7 beats. This is going to be kind of your foundation for everything that comes after it. So you'll want to make sure that these are really, really aligned. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so it might sound a little bit strange to end there, but what we're going to do from there is start on A and play 5 notes descending the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like so. So adding that on, we'll have the first 7 beats as groupings of 4. The 8th beat is going to be a grouping of 5. It's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cool. So once you get comfortable with those basic scalar patterns up and down the keyboard, what you're going to do from there is play the exact same exercise over again. So you'll play it 3 times in total, like so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1. Notice for that last repeat, the 4th one, I actually took off a beat of the descending 16th notes. This is so it lines up squarely into 4 measures of 8/4, but if that's uncomfortable, feel free to just repeat it as presented in the first cycle 4 times through, and it'll end up on a downbeat as normal, just not in 4 measures of 8/4. Now, you might be saying at this point, well, Robert, isn't that just 33/16? Why wouldn't I just think about it as 33/16? And you're absolutely right, but what we're going to do from this point is place a metronome on every single downbeat. And it's going to be in 8/4. It's not going to be in 33/16. So what this does is as we get to each new cycle, we're hearing the same material over and over again, except it's going to be shifted over a beat each time. I'll show you what I mean. I have my metronome here. I don't know if it's going to be heard. on the microphones, hopefully. So this is quarter note equals 100. You're welcome to practice this faster or slower, whatever's comfortable. But essentially, same exercise presented with 7 beats of 4 16th notes and 1 beat of 5 16th notes shifted over. It's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So notice that as I got to each new measure or each new pattern, because I had included that grouping of 5, the second repeat was shifted over to the E, the third repeat was shifted over to the and the last one was shifted over to the So now that you're comfortable with just these basic 16th notes up and down the keyboard, shifting them over a partial each time, what we're going to do is we're going to replace the first 6 16th notes, first 6 beats of 16th notes with 6 beats of 8th notes. So we have essentially 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 E and a 6 E and a is going to become 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and. The 7 E and the 8 E and is going to be exactly the same. So we still have that shift, that single 16th note shift over the bar line, except we're just replacing it with 8th notes. This is going to present more of a challenge because as you get to the 2nd and 4th patterns, the 8th notes are no longer going to line up on 1 and. They're going to be on the E's and the U's. That would sound a little bit like this. So exact same kind of idea, except everything is just going to be in 8th notes for the first couple beats, and we still have that shift over the bar line. The next step is we're going to take the first 2 groupings of 8th notes, the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we're going to replace all of those with a grouping of 4 quarter notes. Again, this just becomes more challenging because you have fewer subdivisions to kind of latch onto, right? So the quarter notes are no longer going to line on just the downbeats. They're going to be on the downbeats, the E's, the ands, and the U's, and so on and so forth. That would sound a little bit like this. And so on and so forth. Again, just presents more of a challenge because you're having to be responsible for more subdivisions each time we kind of expand the rhythm further and further. Cool. So the next step is we're going to get out of these duple subdivisions for just a second, and we're going to try some more complex and more odd subdivisions to work with, although we'll still be within the realm of 16 notes. So I'll give you an example. So if you take the first exercise, the first 6 beats of 16 notes could also be replaced by 2 groupings of 4 dotted 8th notes, and it would equal the same amount of space, right? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 E and a 6 E and a can also become 1 and E, 4 and E, and it equals the exact same amount of space. So we can take that first exercise, replace those first 6 beats, and then everything else remains the same, and now we're having to worry about shifting dotted 8th notes instead of 8th notes or quarter notes or anything like that. That would sound a little bit like this. Up on the downbeat once we're done, but now we're having to contend with the spacing of dotted 8th notes instead of anything in a duple meter. And lastly for today, we're going to take the first 5 beats of the first exercise, the 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 E and we're actually going to replace it with 4 groupings of 5, so a quarter note tied to a 16th note, right? So if we count 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 E that could also be 1 E and that will equal the exact same amount of space. So we still have that grouping of 4, just this time with groupings of 5. That's a terrible way to say that. We still have 4 notes, but groupings of 5 subdivisions, and it lines us up on the same beats. That would sound a little bit like this. of moving these groupings of 4 over by a 16th note every time, but just with subdivisions of 5 instead of 2s, 3s, anything like that. So again, if this is a little bit conceptually challenging, I apologize, but I encourage you to take the first exercise and get really, really comfortable with that. Just displacing these groupings of 4 16th notes around a 16th note every time you repeat the cycle. And then once you get really comfortable with that, everything we're doing in future variations is just replacing beats in the first exercise, right? We took the 16th notes from the first exercise, replaced them with 8th notes in the second exercise, and then replaced some of those 8th notes with quarter notes, and then we replaced the 16th notes with dotted 8th notes, and then groupings of 5 after that. If you find that you're having trouble counting through the dotted 8th notes and the groupings of 5 16th notes, don't stress. It's mostly because it's forcing you to reconceptualize rhythm in a different way than we're often taught as Western classical musicians. We're often taught that rhythms have an exact association to a pulse or a beat, and that's fantastic, don't get me wrong. But this exercise kind of forces you to think outside the box a little bit and see rhythms not as being associated to a pulse, but being in relation to rhythms around them. This is just a slight reconceptualization. So for example, when I get to the dotted 8th notes, I'm not thinking like 1 and E, 4 and E, 70 and a, 80 and a, E2 and E5 and. I'm trying to think about the speed of the dotted 8th notes, how many subdivisions are in each one, and just placing them accordingly. So it's just forcing you to reconceptualize these rhythms just a little bit. So that's all for this week's episode of Choppin' with Chapman. I hope you found these exercises useful. I know I have in my own playing, just in terms of really solidifying my sense of subdivision and pulse and rhythm and all that good stuff. And a link for the sheet music is in the description of the video, so please feel free to check that out. I highly encourage you to check out this week's because it really helps you kind of solidify your understanding of the concepts we talked about today. So yeah, if you have any questions or concerns or complaints or anything, please feel free to reach out. And we'll see you here again next week with another Choppin' with Chapman.